You were already here, long before the doctor cut the cord, before the first cry, before the first breath. The world just didn't know it yet. They've told you life begins at conception, or at birth, or when a heartbeat flickers on a screen. But none of that is the full truth, because what we call the start of life is only the beginning of visibility, not existence. Your soul didn't arrive like luggage on a conveyor belt. It didn't randomly attach itself to a fetus. It entered through a doorway you were never taught to see, not in biology class, not in religion, not in science. What if there's a process, intelligent, cosmic, deliberate, that brings the infinite into the physical? What if your soul knew exactly when and how to enter this world? And what if remembering that moment could change everything about how you see life, death, and yourself? From the outside, it looks like a switch flips. One moment there's a fertilized egg, and over time, a baby is born. But if that's all it is, why does it feel like there's so much more? Why do so many mothers describe moments of presence during pregnancy that science can't explain? Why do some children speak of memories that don't belong to this life? Why does the very idea of a soul persist across every culture, language, and era, if it were just a myth? The truth is, what we call the beginning of life is a poor substitute for what actually happens. Because what enters the human body isn't just biology, it's awareness. And awareness doesn't obey the rules of matter. It doesn't tick boxes on a developmental chart. It exists before tissue, before neurons, before even the heartbeat. So when we ask, when does life begin? We're really asking, when does consciousness arrive? And that answer doesn't live in medical textbooks. The soul is not a metaphor. It's not an idea passed down from old scriptures or fairy tales. It's the fundamental spark of awareness that animates everything. You can call it spirit, essence, presence, divine code. What matters is that it exists before form, and yet it chooses form. The soul doesn't just land in the body. It descends, patiently, deliberately, through layers of existence, until it locks into the physical. That descent isn't an instant. It's a process, a kind of metaphysical choreography unfolding across realms we can barely perceive. Imagine a threshold that separates two entirely different realities. On one side, the infinite, timeless field of soul, consciousness. On the other, the dense, linear, physical world where we live, eat, grow, and die. Between them is a door, but it's not made of wood or metal. It's energetic, subtle, alive, and crossing through it requires more than just cellular development. It requires alignment, resonance, readiness. Not every pregnancy becomes a full human life. Not every embryo becomes a vessel for consciousness. And even those that do don't all receive the soul at the same moment. That's because the soul waits for the right timing. Not just physical, but spiritual. Some say it watches from beyond, evaluating conditions, mother's energy, father's vibration, karmic timing, before making its descent. That descent, when it happens, shifts everything. The mother might not know what's changed, but she'll feel it. She might dream of a visitor. She might wake with tears in her eyes for no reason. She might just know, without proof, without logic, that someone has arrived. It's not romanticism. It's pattern, repeated across cultures, timelines, and lineages. The soul doesn't crash into the body. It synchronizes with it, like a tuning fork finding its frequency. That process has been described in Sufi poetry, Hindu scripture, and Taoist metaphor. Modern science is only just starting to glimpse its edges through unexplained fetal awareness, quantum consciousness, and prenatal responses no brain could possibly explain. The deeper you look, the more obvious it becomes. The soul isn't imagined. It's remembered. And some of that remembering is simply too sensitive to say here. For the deeper knowledge we can't share on YouTube, and a free digital copy of the Kybalion, sign up to our free newsletter, Insights Academy, via the link in the description. Because what we're really exploring here isn't just when life begins, it's when you began. Not the flesh and bone version of you, but the true you, the part that chose this body, this time, this path. Once you realize that, something strange happens. You stop seeing yourself as a product of biology, and you start seeing yourself as a participant in something vast, ancient, and deliberate. For centuries, mystics, philosophers, and healers have argued over one question more than any other. When, exactly, does the soul enter the human body? It's not just academic, it's existential. Because that single moment, if it exists, separates a living being from an empty shell. And depending on who you ask, the soul steps through the veil at very different stages. Yet behind the differences, there's a hidden thread, a common pulse, pointing to something deeper. The first theory says it happens at conception. That at the very moment the sperm fuses with the egg, a new energetic field is created, something that didn't exist before. It's like the universe flips a switch. In Christian mysticism and certain esoteric schools, this moment is described as a kind of sacred spark, a flash of divine intent fusing with flesh. Supporters of this view often speak of an unmistakable shift, of the energy of conception being more than physical. Some mothers report vivid dreams the night they conceived. Others felt an emotional shift, sudden, inexplicable peace or overwhelming joy, as if something unseen had entered the room. It's not about superstition, it's about resonance. The fusion of DNA is seen as the soul's signal, the creation of a unique energetic frequency that calls the soul forward, but not everyone agrees. The second theory places the soul's entry not at conception, but during implantation. Roughly a week after fertilization, the embryo travels to the uterus and embeds itself in the womb's lining. Here, supporters say, is where the energetic contract becomes real. The embryo is no longer just floating in potential, it's found a home. Many shamanic traditions see this moment as a negotiation, a spiritual handshake between the mother and the incoming soul. Hormones shift. The mother's body begins broadcasting a new frequency, and the soul, sensing the signal, begins its descent. It's not immediate, it's not forceful. It's a slow, respectful entry. And the timing, they say, is no coincidence. This is when the pregnancy becomes biologically real, but also energetically personal. Then there's the third theory, perhaps the most poetic of all, that the soul enters with the first heartbeat. Around the third week of gestation, a tiny pulse begins, smaller than a seed. It's not conscious thought, it's not breath, but it's rhythm, motion, life. Across countless traditions, Egyptian, Greek, Chinese, the heart has always been seen as more than an organ. It's the seat of the soul, the center of knowing. So, when that microscopic heart begins to beat, some believe it's not just biology, it's a soul saying, "I'm here." Mothers who subscribe to this view often describe that moment as a turning point. Some speak of chills or of time slowing. Others say they felt watched from within, like something conscious had turned its gaze outward for the first time. Each theory seems to contradict the others, but look closer, and a different picture emerges. Maybe it's not a single flash of arrival. Maybe it's a multi-stage process. Ancient Kabbalistic and Eastern philosophies speak of soul layers, parts of consciousness descending at different times. One layer anchors at conception, another during implantation, another still at the heartbeat, like a cosmic blueprint being printed, one level at a time. This layered descent explains why each theory holds truth. It's not either or, it's all of them. Because the soul is not one-dimensional, it's complex, intelligent, and precise. It doesn't crash into the body, it steps into it with intention, in stages, aligning its entry with the rhythms of the growing vessel. And when you see it that way, everything begins to make more sense. The dreams, the sensations, the ancient rituals, all map back to these turning points, moments where the invisible becomes just a little more visible. There's something about the number 40 that keeps showing up in ancient stories. 40 days of flood in the story of Noah, 40 days of fasting in the desert for Jesus, 40 days of meditation beneath the Bodhi tree for the Buddha. 40 years in the wilderness. 40-day mourning periods. Sacred transitions measured not in years, but in precise windows of time. And when you look at the beginning of human life, that number quietly appears again, in the womb. The first 40 days of gestation form a window so delicate, so charged, and so significant that nearly every spiritual tradition gives it sacred weight. It's not just an arbitrary phase of development. It's a portal, a transformational zone, where the physical and non-physical converge. In many mystical traditions, it's taught that during this time, the soul negotiates its full entry into the body. Some say this is when it decides whether to stay or go, whether the incarnation is aligned or not, whether the vessel being prepared is capable of carrying the specific mission it has chosen. From a purely biological perspective, those 40 days are remarkable. It's when nearly all the major systems begin forming. The brain begins to emerge, the spine, the heart, the buds of arms and legs. By the end of those 40 days, the embryo has transformed into a recognizable human blueprint. But science only tells half the story. Because if the body is being built, who or what is guiding its construction? Esoteric teachings suggest the soul is not passively waiting to arrive. It's already involved. It's overseeing, influencing, directing. Imagine an architect stepping into a half-built structure, tweaking the design as the scaffolding rises. Some spiritual schools say the soul weaves itself into the fabric of the body during this window, creating energetic bonds, implanting memory, emotion, even intent. And because this process is subtle, not material, it often shows up in the most unexpected ways. Mothers speak of this phase with a strange reverence, often without knowing why. Dreams intensify. Time distorts. Some women describe waking up at the same time every night, feeling watched, not in fear, but in awe. Others recall sensations in the body that have no medical explanation. Vibrations, flutters, or sudden waves of emotion that don't feel like their own. Some experience a sudden sense of clarity or stillness, like the space around them has been filled with something profound. It's not imagination. It's the soul arriving. Interestingly, this period often ends before the mother even knows she's pregnant, as if the soul prefers to anchor in silence, without interference. Like it needs that initial time to embed itself fully before external attention breaks the spell. That's why many cultures traditionally waited 40 days before announcing a pregnancy. Not because of fear, but respect. A silent agreement with the soul to let it settle in undisturbed. And there's something else, something that echoes across spiritual numerology. The number 5. 5 weeks and 5 days make up those 40 days. 5, in ancient symbolic systems, represents the human being. 5 senses, 5 elements, 5 fingers, 5 points on the star. It is the number of manifestation, of divine will taking shape in the physical. It's as if, during those 40 days, the soul is stitching its essence into every corner of the forming body, layer by layer, breath by breath. So what happens when we begin to treat that time not as a blur of cellular activity, but as a sacred dialogue between realms? Everything changes. We start to listen, to honor the unseen, to understand that what's forming in the womb isn't just tissue. It's destiny taking shape. It's a consciousness choosing to land. And it's doing so with extraordinary care, guided by a script that no ultrasound can read, but which your soul knows by heart. Long before hospitals, before scans, before biology textbooks and DNA, ancient civilizations were already mapping the soul's journey into the body. They didn't use microscopes. They didn't need brain scans. What they had was direct experience, visions, dreams, energy, and a kind of knowing that modern science has only just begun to rediscover. What's more striking is this. These ancient maps, drawn thousands of miles and hundreds of years apart, describe the same journey in different words, as if they were all pointing to the same hidden truth, that incarnation isn't a flick of the switch. It's a descent, a process, a sacred path that the soul walks into matter. In Hindu cosmology, The soul is called Atman, the eternal self, untouched by time or form. According to these teachings, the soul doesn't just drop into a body. It descends through Saptapatala, the 7 layers of existence, gradually clothing itself in denser and denser energy until it reaches the physical plane. Each layer corresponds to a different chakra, a different frequency, and a different aspect of human experience: vitality, emotion, will, thought, intuition, awareness, and finally, embodiment. The process is deliberate. Each step is like a tuning of an instrument, preparing the soul to live inside the dense realm of time, gravity, and physical laws. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo teachings explain what happens between death and rebirth. After death, consciousness enters a liminal state called the Bardo, a realm of vision, reflection, and karmic reckoning. Here, the soul doesn't just wait, it chooses. It observes potential families, potential timelines, searching for the exact energetic match for its next lessons. And when it finds the right conditions, it doesn't instantly enter. It establishes a thread, a subtle tether to the future mother. It begins shaping events from behind the veil. Only when the moment is right, spiritually, emotionally, astrologically, does the soul finally enter. This process can take up to 49 days, and during that time the soul isn't idle. It's crafting its return. Taoist traditions, rooted in nature and subtle energetics, paint a different, but equally poetic picture. They describe the soul as a droplet forming in the clouds of the Tao, the infinite source of all things. That droplet condenses slowly over time, gaining density, memory, and form as it prepares to fall into the physical world. But even once it lands, once the body is born, it still maintains an invisible thread to the clouds above. The Taoists believed in the 3 Hun, 3 spiritual aspects of the soul that arrive at different stages. The first enters at conception, the second around the 3rd month, the third only at birth. These are not abstract metaphors. They are detailed, precise, and consistent teachings that span centuries. In the West, esoteric Christianity had its own language for the same truth. Hildegard of Bingen, a mystic of the 12th century, described seeing souls descend as golden light, clothing themselves in the forming bodies of the unborn. Meister Eckhart spoke of incarnation not as a sudden act, but as fire gradually igniting another fire, a slow and sacred kindling of divine presence within matter. In apocryphal texts and the writings of mystics, the soul is never just placed into a body. It's received, welcomed, woven in, as if spiritual midwives, unseen by human eyes, assist in the anchoring of the soul during pregnancy. What's remarkable is not just that these views exist, but that they align. These traditions span continents: India, Tibet, China, Europe. They developed independently, without contact, separated by language and time. And yet they all describe the soul's entry as a layered, conscious act. Not accidental, not mechanical, but meaningful, mystical, and timed with cosmic precision. So why don't we talk about this anymore? Why did modern culture discard this shared, ancient wisdom? Because somewhere along the way, we began to worship visibility. If it can't be seen, scanned, or measured, we don't trust it. But our ancestors didn't have that limitation. They trusted experience. They trusted intuition. They trusted the rhythms of the cosmos more than the data of a lab. Maybe it's time we remember what they never forgot, that your soul's arrival wasn't just an act of nature, it was an act of intention, an act of will, a return through the ages, carried by symbols, signs, and stories that still whisper the truth to those willing to listen. For decades, science tried to stay out of this conversation. The soul, they said, was the realm of religion and fantasy. Real knowledge belonged to biology, to chemistry, to data you could measure in a lab. But that silence is breaking, quietly, unevenly, and often without using the word soul at all. But the findings are there, buried in research papers, whispered in neuroscience labs, and reluctantly discussed at the edges of medical conferences. Modern science is beginning to catch glimpses of what ancient traditions have always known. There's something else here, something aware, something intelligent, and it's present earlier than we ever imagined. Start with the fetus. Traditional biology said it's not conscious until much later in pregnancy, long after the major organs develop. But new research suggests something different. By the end of the first trimester, the fetus responds to music. Not just noise, music, tones, melodies, rhythms. Not only does it respond, it remembers. Play a specific piece of music during pregnancy, and newborns show recognition of it after birth. That's not reflex. That's awareness. That's memory. Then there's emotional resonance. Studies show that a fetus can mirror the emotional state of its mother in real time. If the mother feels joy, the fetal heartbeat responds. If she feels stress, the chemical changes aren't just passed through the placenta, they're felt, mirrored. Some researchers believe this is evidence of early emotional intelligence, developing long before the neocortex should make that possible. But what if it's not the brain doing the sensing? What if it's the soul? And it doesn't stop there. Quantum biology, a field still in its infancy, has started uncovering bizarre phenomena at the cellular level that challenge every materialist assumption. Biophotons, tiny particles of light emitted by living cells, seem to carry information. DNA itself emits and absorbs this light, almost like an antenna. In some experiments, cells separated by vast distances still react to each other as if they're connected. There's no known biological mechanism for this, but there is something else: consciousness. Not the kind created by the brain, but the kind that exists independently of it. You also have prenatal psychology, a field built on the strange but persistent reports of patients recalling their time in the womb. Through hypnosis, deep meditation, and regression therapy, people describe sensations, impressions, even decisions made before birth. And these aren't vague metaphors. They're vivid, detailed, and emotionally specific. Some recall choosing their parents. Others describe a kind of waiting room, a liminal space where time moved differently. One recurring theme: observation, a sense of watching the pregnancy unfold from a distance before finally entering. These accounts are so consistent across language and culture that they've forced even skeptical therapists to ask, is something else guiding the formation of identity before the body is even finished? And what about genes? Recent studies in epigenetics show that genes can switch on or off in response to emotional and environmental factors, sometimes even before birth. But who or what is orchestrating that switch? It's not random. The genome doesn't act like a blind machine. It adapts. It responds to meaning. And meaning, by its nature, implies awareness. Science won't call it a soul. Not yet. It will use terms like non-local consciousness, biophotonic intelligence, or emergent awareness. But behind the jargon, the implication is the same. Consciousness isn't waiting for the brain to finish. It's already active, already directing, already shaping the body from within. It's as if the soul is leaving fingerprints inside the womb, subtle, luminous signs that say, "I'm here, I've arrived, and I've been guiding this from the very beginning." Not all signs arrive wrapped in symbols or carved into ancient scrolls. Some show up in the middle of the night, suddenly, inexplicably. A mother wakes from sleep with tears in her eyes and no idea why. She swears she felt something pass through her, a flicker, a presence. She wasn't afraid, just aware, like someone had walked into the room without making a sound. Other times it's more subtle. A dog who suddenly begins guarding the belly, a cat who won't leave your side, a shift in how food tastes, how sound feels, how time moves. You can't prove it, but you feel it. That's the soul speaking, gently announcing, "I've arrived." Across cultures and continents, these kinds of signs have been recorded for centuries. And they all have one thing in common. They defy logic but resonate deeply. They don't come from the mind. They land in the body. Intuition flares. Dreams turn vivid. Some people report dreaming of a child before they even know they're pregnant. Not metaphorical children, actual souls with names, personalities, even preferences. These aren't hallucinations. They're meetings, soul-to-soul conversations before the physical connection is fully made. Sometimes it starts with an energetic pull. A mother may feel like someone's watching from just beyond the veil. Not in a spooky or threatening way, but with affection, with intention, as if the soul is testing the space before stepping through it. There are stories of women who were told by doctors they couldn't conceive, only to have dreams of a child standing at the foot of their bed, patiently waiting. Then, weeks or months later, they're pregnant. Coincidence? Or did the soul know something before biology did? Children, too, have stories to tell. Ask them where they came from, and sometimes you'll get answers that stop you cold. "I picked you," a toddler might say. Or, "I was waiting for the stars to be right." Some children describe choosing their parents, even knowing about events that happened before they were born. There are cases where children have described miscarried siblings accurately without ever being told about them, as if they met them somewhere between worlds, in that waiting space where souls gather before entering. Even animals seem to pick up on the shift. There are countless accounts of pets changing behavior just before or after conception. A usually distant cat becomes protective. A dog starts sleeping near the mother's stomach every night. Some animals mirror the emotional state of the mother as if they too sense the new presence in the room. And perhaps they do. Animals aren't clouded by disbelief. They don't need proof to trust what they feel. There's also the phenomenon of soul cravings, sudden urges or aversions that feel foreign. A woman who never liked classical music begins obsessively playing Mozart, only to discover years later that her child becomes a pianist. A craving for books, colors, or languages that seem out of character. These aren't random. They may be preferences bleeding through as the soul begins shaping the environment it will grow within. Then there are the whispers, those moments when you hear a voice that isn't yours, gently guiding a decision, a feeling that tells you to slow down or to turn a certain way. Some mothers describe this voice as wise, others as childlike, but all agree it doesn't feel like their own thought. It feels external, loving, present, and always familiar. We've been trained to ignore these signs, to dismiss them as hormones, imagination, or coincidence. But if we listened, really listened, we might discover something extraordinary. That the soul doesn't arrive in silence. It leaves trails, patterns, moments of recognition that bypass the mind and go straight to the heart. And those signs don't just stop after birth. They keep unfolding, revealing just how intelligent and aware this process truly is. Because this isn't just about biology or consciousness, it's about relationship. The soul doesn't just enter the body, it begins a conversation, one that starts before you can speak and echoes through every moment of your life. We've been taught to believe that life begins with a spark of chance. An egg meets a sperm, and somehow, a life is made. But ask anyone who's ever looked deeper, and they'll tell you the same thing. It never felt random. There's too much precision, too many patterns, too many strange, synchronistic moments that make you wonder, what if I chose all of this? The parents, the timing, even the struggles. What if incarnation isn't something that just happens to the soul, but something the soul orchestrates? In many spiritual traditions, this is exactly what's taught. The soul isn't just dropped into a vessel like water into a cup. It surveys, it waits, it chooses, and it doesn't pick randomly. It looks at lineage, potential trauma, karmic cycles, astrological alignments, and emotional energy, all of it. Not because it's judging, but because it has a mission, a curriculum, a path that it's come to walk. And not every environment is right for that. Hypnotherapists like Dr. Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon spent decades documenting thousands of cases of people under deep regression, recounting their experiences between lives. These aren't vague memories. These are detailed, consistent accounts of what happens before birth, when the soul is in that space between incarnations, reviewing past lives, and preparing for the next. In these sessions, people describe choosing their families with astonishing clarity. Some speak of turning down multiple options. Others describe observing potential parents for months, even years, before entering. They look at dynamics, at whether those people can provide the lessons needed. Sometimes the choice is about love. Sometimes growth through challenge. Often, it's both. The soul doesn't just want comfort, it wants expansion. And sometimes that means choosing difficulty. That's not cruelty, that's mastery. Imagine choosing a life where heartbreak would awaken your compassion, or where loss would teach you presence. Souls don't run from these lessons, they move toward them. Because in the soul's language, everything, every twist and turn, is a mirror for evolution. And here's the part that challenges every materialist worldview: timing. According to many spiritual systems and regression cases, the soul doesn't just pick the parents, it waits for specific alignments in the stars. Astrology isn't about prediction, it's about resonance. The soul looks for a moment when the energetic map of the heavens reflects the inner blueprint it needs for its journey. That moment, down to the minute, is when it chooses to enter. Birth charts, then, aren't just personality tools. They're contracts, codes, sacred blueprints etched in sky, and it gets deeper. There are stories, again, across traditions, of souls that planned to incarnate, but didn't. Sometimes the timing shifts. The family dynamic changes. The physical vessel isn't able to support the soul's mission, and so the soul withdraws. Miscarriages, then, aren't failures. They are transitions. Moments where the body may have been ready, but the soul chose to delay. Not because it changed its mind, but because something shifted. The dance between soul and body is incredibly sensitive. Every element, emotion, timing, even the collective energy of the planet, can influence whether the soul fully anchors or waits for another opening. Some souls stay nearby, hovering like quiet guides until the timing is right. Others move on entirely. And in rare cases, a soul may step into a developing body later in pregnancy, a concept known as walk-in entry, more common in esoteric teachings. In all versions, one thing remains clear: the soul is not a passive passenger. It's the architect behind the curtain. This understanding changes everything. It means your life isn't an accident. It's a design. You're not here because biology allowed it. You're here because your soul chose this moment. It chose your body, your family, your city, your challenges. That means everything you've experienced, every triumph and every pain, has been part of something far bigger than survival. It's been part of your evolution. And it means the people in your life, especially your family, are not coincidences. They're part of your soul's contract. Not always for comfort, but always for growth. Sometimes, the most difficult people in our lives are the ones who agreed, at a soul level, to play that role, to help trigger our awakening. It's not always easy, but it is sacred. You are not just a body animated by consciousness. You are consciousness that chose a body. And once you understand that, you begin to live differently. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "Why did I choose this?" That one question can open doors no religion or science ever could. They told you that life begins with a spark, an explosion of cells, a collision of biology, a cascade of chemical reactions too complex to comprehend but too random to mean anything. You were taught to believe that consciousness is just a byproduct of neurons firing, a freak accident of evolution with no deeper meaning. But if you've made it this far, something inside you knows that explanation isn't enough. It never was. The materialist worldview, the idea that everything begins and ends with matter, has dominated science and culture for over a century. It shaped how you were taught to see yourself. It said you were born when your heart first beat, or when your brain lit up on a scan. It said your memories, emotions, dreams, and desires are nothing more than chemical echoes. It said you are your body, and nothing more. But what if that view was never complete? What if the very system that taught you to question everything never wanted you to question that? See, this isn't just about the soul. It's about the war on mystery, the slow erasure of the invisible, the intuitive, the sacred. We built a world obsessed with facts, but allergic to wonder. We've mapped every organ, sequenced every gene, but we still can't explain why a mother knows something is wrong before a single test shows it. We can measure brainwaves but can't trace the source of déjà vu. We have no tools to explain how someone can recall a past life or know things they were never taught. And that makes the materialist model nervous. Because if the soul exists, if you existed before the body, then everything changes. It means there's more to you than flesh and neurons. It means life didn't begin at conception or the heartbeat or the brainstem. It began before. And if that's true, it means the system built around reductionist thinking, the pharmaceutical empires, the institutions of education, even some branches of medicine, have been working off an incomplete script. This video isn't here to tell you what to believe. It's here to remind you that you can believe more, that science and soul are not enemies, that mystery isn't ignorance, it's depth, and that your existence is far more deliberate than you've been led to believe. Consciousness isn't something that accidentally emerges from matter. Matter responds to consciousness, always has. The ancient traditions knew it, mystics lived it, and modern science, slowly, quietly, is beginning to remember it. If you trace your life backwards, past the birth, past the womb, past even your earliest memory, you'll find something that doesn't quite fit the model. A presence, a hum of awareness, a flicker of I that was always there, even before you had a name, a face, or a language. That's the you they don't teach about in school. That's the you that can't be dissected in a lab. The real you, the soul. And once you accept that you were never just a body with a mind, but a soul with a body, you stop seeing life as something that happens to you. You start seeing it as something you're navigating through. Like a lucid dream, with lessons and symbols and codes just waiting to be unlocked. You begin to trust your intuition, because it's the voice of something ancient, not a glitch in your chemistry. You begin to question the scripts you've inherited about success, love, death, and time. And when you start doing that, you're no longer easy to control. Because here's the uncomfortable truth for the system. Awakened people don't follow blindly. They don't settle for shallow answers. They don't live lives built on someone else's checklist. They remember who they were before the noise. And once you remember, you can't unremember. You begin seeing through the illusion of randomness. You begin trusting the signs. You begin asking questions that unmake the very foundation of the world you were born into. And if you've been feeling that pull lately, toward truth, towards self, towards something you can't quite name, that's not coincidence. That's the soul stirring, whispering, asking to be remembered. Your life is not an accident, and your existence isn't confined to what you can see. You're part of something vast, something intelligent, something beautifully deliberate. If the soul enters the body through intention, not randomness, not biology, but conscious choice, then what does that say about why you're here? What does that say about what you're meant to do with your life? The system gave you a definition of purpose, one built on performance, milestones, and external proof. Graduate, climb, accumulate, fit in. And if you manage to survive that gauntlet, they reward you with a shallow prize. Status, security, stability, but never sovereignty, never soul. They told you success meant doing what everyone else was doing, just better, faster, louder. But here's the question that unravels all of it. What if your soul didn't come here to be impressive? What if it came here to be true? Purpose isn't found at the end of achievement. It's remembered in stillness, recovered in moments when the noise dies down long enough for you to hear your own heartbeat. Not the physical one, the soul pulse. That quiet knowing that says, "This is me." You don't need a title for that. You don't need permission. You don't even need certainty. You only need alignment. Most people are chasing a life that impresses others but suffocates their own spirit. They wake up in jobs that drain them, in relationships that mute them, in systems that reward their obedience but punish their originality. Not because they're weak, but because they've forgotten. Forgotten that they chose to be here. Forgotten that the real work isn't to fit in, but to remember what they came here to express, and then build a life around that. Living like a soul means seeing your time here as sacred. It means no longer trading your energy for empty applause. It means saying no to the boxes that don't fit, even if everyone else calls them normal. It means asking, what lights me up, even if no one claps? What have I loved since before I knew what success even was? What would I create if no one ever saw it but me? This isn't spiritual fluff, it's soul architecture. Because when you live in alignment, you stop outsourcing your value. You stop chasing the finish lines they gave you. You begin designing from the inside out. And that doesn't just change your life. It creates a ripple effect that touches everyone around you. Authenticity is contagious. When you step into who you really are, you give others permission to do the same. That's how the system begins to collapse, not through noise or protest, but through people quietly refusing to betray themselves any longer. One awakened life can disrupt generations of programming. If you felt stuck or unfulfilled, it's not because you're broken. It's because your soul is asking for something deeper. It's nudging you away from performance and into presence. You weren't sent here to be a pawn in someone else's empire. You came to build something honest, something whole, something only you could bring through. And if you don't know what that is yet, start here. What breaks your heart and heals it at the same time? What do you feel drawn to when you're not being watched? Follow that. That's your breadcrumb trail home. The real definition of success isn't how much you can hold, but how fully you can be. When you live from soul, purpose isn't a job title or a financial milestone. It's the everyday rebellion of showing up as your whole self in a world that keeps asking you to edit, to shrink, to sell out. Refuse. The only validation you'll ever need is the knowing that your life echoes your truth. And if you've made it this far, if something in you has been stirred, awakened, or even just quietly affirmed, then know this: your path is unfolding exactly as it's meant to. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're remembering. Now is the time to build a life your soul would be proud of. One choice at a time. One moment at a time. And you don't have to do it alone. We go even deeper into this inner work in our free newsletter, Insights Academy. It's where we unpack the hidden frameworks behind purpose, consciousness, and real liberation, beyond what we can say here. Plus, for a limited time, you'll get a full digital copy of the Kabbalion when you sign up. The link is below. Don't miss this. Some truths aren't meant to be hidden forever. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it,"